Great. Well, welcome everybody. Um, this is actually a really nice thing to do at the end of every semester, but especially this one, just a time of reflection on what just took place and what might be awaiting us as we go farther down the road. But I think we've certainly all had a long time to reflect and to kind of live into this moment. The title of our little discussion here is Making Sense of Pandemic Academics. And making sense is the real challenge, is what we're all trying to do, trying to figure this out. But I think there have been obviously a lot of challenges, but some unanticipated joys, maybe some unanticipated ways of learning, some pathways of learning, certainly that I never saw coming. And I'm hoping we can talk about that today. We welcome all of our friends on Facebook, colleagues, students. We hope that you'll join us during this time. Send us your questions, any thoughts, suggestions that you have as we go forward. The way we're going to kind of structure this conversation is a little bit of time with my colleagues here, which I'll introduce in a moment. And then we're going to hear from some of our own students about their experience during these last 8 weeks. And then broaden the conversation even more with some other faculty and other people online. You can join us, and who knows, maybe this will be a really productive time and give us some great ideas as we go forward and we look to the fall. So it's a great joy, frankly, just to see my neighbors in the con. Professor of voice, Katherine Jolly, Professor of violin, Marilyn McDonald, and Professor of flute, Alexa Still. And I've been surprised how much over Zoom, of course, we miss being together. We miss that contact, personal contact in the conservatory, but I'm surprised how much emotion and how much feeling comes through the screen, even as we see each other, we hear each other's voices. Certainly that's been my experience with my students and colleagues. And that was unanticipated to me. At first, I thought this was going to be more scientific, but I think we had some wonderful moments over the course of these 8 weeks. So it's for me, and kind of my own reflection over the time, when we think about kind of preparing for this, there really was no preparation. I mean, we were just thrust into this with absolutely no time to really comprehend. I think there was a certain shock value for me and for all of us running home, not knowing how we're going to deal with this illness that is surrounding us, and then trying to grapple with how we're going to teach music during this time. Specifically for organ instruction, that was really hard because obviously we don't carry our instrument around. We go to it. Our instruments are housed in large facilities, and it is, as with all musicians, the relationship between the artist and the instrument is so important, and particularly at Oberlin, this is one of our great experiences there, that our students come not only to learn together, but also to learn from the instruments themselves. We have this just world-renowned collection of organs, and we miss them just as much as the people that we share the time with. And so that was a real challenge. And then, finding the circumstances of each student to be different. When they went home, some of them had access to organs at their homes. Some of them had access to instruments at churches, but many of them had access to no instruments, or maybe just a piano. And I think this was a great challenge for all of us. It brought out a real sort of inequality among the ability to have access to the technology that connects us, but also the ability to use it effectively. I mean, I found some of my students were really savvy, much more savvy than I was with all of this technology, but we kind of learned through it. So that was Um, that was a real challenge. But we found some ways, I think, to learn. Later on, I'll talk with my student William about some of our successes, but we found some ways to listen and learn from each other. Mostly on our end, we did it through recordings. So I had the students record performances if they had access to an organ or a piano. They would send it to me ahead of time. I could listen to it. They would even send me scans of their scores. And then I could come together with them later in the week and we could have a conversation about some of the choices they made. It also gave me a little time then to prepare my thoughts and do a little research for them. They could read some articles, whatever, do a little bit of preparation that way. I think the last thing I'll comment on before I turn it over to my colleagues was some of the unanticipated ways of learning that came through this. And I've been thinking about this a lot as a result of this whole experience that we've had through the pandemic. And I think there is a maturity and there's a great change that's taking place just in all of us as human beings. And I think this is going to have a profound impact on our music. I think I have seen all of my students, and I'm sure you have seen it in yours, I've seen a maturity come forth as they face these really, really kind of existential questions of who we are and why we're here and what our music is for and how much it means to us. I saw an arc over these 8 weeks, almost an emotional arc, and I certainly felt it. I feel it now. But as we kind of worked through the shock of this whole thing and how to learn through it, and then got into this, we began to grapple with the truths around us that were really difficult to deal with. Some of our students, I know they have family members who are sick. They were surrounded by people with great economic challenges. And then suddenly, now we were left with this question, why are we doing this? And why is our art here? And for all of us, for me and for my students, it's been such a confirmation. I mean, this music and this art, we need it more than ever. And I think as we emerge from this time, and you think through the kind of historical events, when there's been great moments of trauma, usually it follows with great moments of creativity and remarkable works of art. So that makes me excited to see what's going to emerge from this time. And I just know our students are going to emerge from this time as really profound musicians. So I want to turn it over to my colleague Alexa Still. She's down the hall. I can wave down the hall and hear your beautiful flute through the door, and love to hear a little bit about what your experience has been like.
I was really struck by how you said it's been 8 weeks, and I realized that I hadn't actually thought about that. In some ways, it feels like it's been about 2 weeks. It just seems so intense. I feel like the time has just like flown by in a ridiculous fashion, and it seems like I'm not quite sure. I mean, obviously, I hadn't thought in advance about what this would be like. Even when we thought we had a bit of time to get used to the idea, I hadn't thought about what it would actually feel like. And I guess I imagined that, well, at least I'd be at home and maybe things would be easier just being in one place. But actually, it's really hard. And by the time, I mean, I'm doing the same thing. I was doing the same thing as you with lessons, getting a recording sent to me the night before or something like that. And so you listen through that, and then you have the lesson. And so there's actually more time in anyway. But also, trying to find music that I can send as a scan to a student, and some of the students who were staying off campus but in the area didn't have access to a printer, so I tried to get them some printed copies. And you take for granted that you can have your music in print when you need to scribble on it. Not everybody has fancy, iPad professionals yet. So I know I certainly don't. So there are a lot of little sort of silly logistical things. And I don't know about you guys, but I worked really hard when we all left campus to try and sign up for the help sessions on how to use Zoom, and I tried seeing if I could use VoiceThread, and I didn't know enough about these platforms that I felt like I had to try them. And I mean, I'll discuss this with my student a bit later. I tried all these different platforms because the flute is such a nuisance. And that was a complete waste of time, but I still spent ages trying it, right? So the time has gone whizzing by. And wow, 8 weeks. It's just like stunning. And I think the really captivating thing from my point of view was seeing how the students got home. And then I think for a lot of them, it was like, oh my God, now what? Because they'd been so busy on campus. Oberlin students work so hard and they're so busy nonstop. And then to go home and to not have the busy peers, helping them be busy. I think it's really hard to sit down and make yourself do stuff when you haven't got other people around you doing the same thing. And it reinforces why Oberlin, as a residential campus where everybody is here doing it together, it reinforces to me why that's so successful, or one of the reasons it's so successful. It's a wonderful environment, and you pull people out of that, and that's really hard. I feel so sorry for the students having to cope with that. And it seemed to me, actually, there were quite a few weeks here that were quite hard for a lot of people. Maybe people who have not such great home environments, difficulty finding somewhere to practice. You can't choose your rallies, right? That's a famous down under saying. You can't choose your rallies. And you can't choose whether your brother is next door and sleeping until 2 p.m. So like, when do you practice and all that sort of stuff. One of my students has always sat outside on his balcony for his lessons, and it kind of makes me wonder if he wants to be there or he sort of has to be there. Like, I'm not going to ask, but it's not so easy. And I think then probably a couple of weeks later, people seemed to sort of sort out a little bit what they could do in their environment. And then actually some of my students did some really good work, really quite extraordinary. And I don't know if it was because they had to figure out how to be controlling themselves and controlling their schedule and actually using a lot of initiative to keep going and doing stuff. Or maybe it was the end of the semester being imminent and just needing to get through things. I'm not entirely sure, but it seemed like people settled down a bit and got more done. But it's really been tough. I would really hate to be in this situation long term. Someone's got a really wonderful
That's my
cat. So I think Catherine's cat
Not
is saying it's time for Katherine to talk. So I'd love to hand it over to the wonderful Katherine.
So it's actually a perfect segue, because I have found one of the biggest challenges is having wonderfully resonant voices in my home all day long with my two cats that are used to a certain amount of sleep and space. So they make appearances, and my students already knew them, but they know them a lot better now. That's the youngest, who likes to sing along. Overall, I think I've been really surprised at how beautifully my students have adjusted to this new way of engaging with material, and that overall it's been actually a really positive experience. So I'd taught online some before, usually like singers that are on the road out doing it and they want to have a check-in lesson from the dressing room, from their hotel, working on a new role or things like that, but never for this extended period of time. But I found actually my students have just made extraordinary progress, extraordinary growth, and in some ways seem a lot more focused, and certainly like enhanced gratitude and grace, just in terms of the fact that if we're healthy enough to wake up and do this thing, engage with our art, what a blessing that is. And overall, that's what I've experienced. There have been a few challenges sometimes with internet speeds, but overall, it's been really good. I've mostly used FaceTime because I've found that the audio delay is less than it is on Zoom, and it allows me to hear kind of better in real time acoustically what's happening with them. I have one student that doesn't have an Apple device, so we've used Google Chat and we've used Zoom. We've used Zoom for studio classes that have totally been transformed, and I think we all miss the live performing, but we still did our studio recital, and one of my great students put together an iMovie of everyone's videos in the same order that we would have done our live studio recital, and then they can share it with all their families.
Wow.
I too have had like videos and recordings coming to me in addition to their twice weekly lessons, and our studio classes kind of turned into a really cool cross section of courses. So every week we choose a broadcast that we're going to watch live from the Met. I guess I choose it, and it's different genres, different languages, different time periods. And then we come together and we have like an Opera Jeopardy or a Q&A discussion where we can engage about time periods, about the composer, about the librettist. We can talk about different voice types, great singers of the past. It leads into all these other discussions, and they've really loved it. So we thought we're going to keep going this summer. And I think that's something really cool that I just thought, well, how are we going to all keep engaged as a community and keep everyone excited? And that came out of that. And we still had regular juries, just like we would have, just with me instead of the whole faculty. They each had a time and they had to do the same stuff they would have done. We've done weekly reflections. So I've sent prompts every week about challenges that have happened for them during the week, maybe just logistical life challenges, how they're feeling, how they're doing, setting intentions for the next week, asking about, unexpected, beautiful things that might have come up during their work. And then some personal goals that they have for kind of constructing the week going on. So in our first meeting after we all came home, I said, okay, so we have to make a promise that you're going to get up and change from your night pajamas to your day pajamas. That's like, that's where we're gonna start. That's the bar, okay? And we kept all the lesson times the same, except for a few people who are in different time zones, if it worked for their families, kept studio time the same. So like as much structure as possible, which, as I talk to them about it, it's the same kind of things I'm trying to do for myself, right? So you get up and you try to conduct your day just as you would if you were leaving to go to campus, and that routine is some comfort in this time of unexpectedness. So there have certainly been challenges, but overall, I've just been so incredibly moved and inspired by the work that my students have done, by the way that they are still engaging with each other as community members, checking in with each other. They have group chats and all that stuff, in my studio. And I too have seen so much growth in maturity. And to me, that's how you become a great artist, right? These aren't circumstances anyone would ever wish for, but I too believe that this generation of students are going to end up with some really profound insights about life that maybe they couldn't have had without, So yeah, I'm hopeful for moving forward, whether it's online, hybrid, or back on campus. I feel really lucky to be a part of a community like this.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
And I should pass it to Professor McDonald.
Thank you. I appreciate everything that all of you said, and certainly second all the positive comments, because I think we've all felt that this has been a very special experience. I have to say, I felt like Alexa was saying that she felt it went by terribly fast, and in some ways I did feel that, but in some ways I felt like I had a mini lifetime experience in those past 8 weeks. And I think I changed as much as the students in some ways. Something happened to me at the very beginning of the Zoom experience. I taught my grandson online. He lives in Madison, Wisconsin, and he was playing the Sights Concerto, which is a standard for a 10-year-old. And I played it for him, and he said, Grandma, I know you're a good violinist, but that really didn't sound very good. And that was sort of how I felt at the beginning myself, like the violin has certain difficulties on Zoom. When it goes into the very high register, sometimes it disappears. It sometimes also becomes very silent in the very lowest register, oddly enough, if it's not loud enough. And the quality itself is not like having the student play in your living room.
Yeah.
So I complained a bit at first. And I don't mean that I'm ashamed of that, but and looking back on it, I have to see how I've changed over the time. Because at first I was going like, oh my goodness, I have to listen to all the 6 hours in a row of the violin on Zoom, a little bit much. But one learns how to make judgments and how to come to conclusions and how to evaluate things on Zoom. At first, you have to listen. I don't want to say in a different way, but I do have to say I was very tired at the end of the day from trying very hard.
Yes.
And I also noticed that I tried very hard to connect with the students. My hand gesticulations got rather excessive. Right, like, well, don't you understand? Like I wanted to be so in touch with them. And I think the whole studio was very much in touch. So that I found that at the end, I have come to really appreciate Zoom. And I've come to appreciate the fact that I was able to connect with the students during this time, and that they were able to connect. Well, they were pretty good at connecting with each other all the time, but we saw each other 3 times a week because everybody had a lesson. We had a studio class, we had a technique class, and it was just like the old days in that if one person would play really well, then everybody would try to beat them the next week. And that was very healthy. But they did it in a slightly different way. I mean, I noticed everyone being extremely considerate and knowledgeable about the other person. So, as I said, I've come to appreciate it, and I've come to realize that it's actually my students who have made me appreciate it. So for me, it was a very nice journey when I think how I complained about the sound the first day and how I feel sad to leave it behind. We will connect in the summer and students will be in touch. We had juries. We had departmental juries. So in fact, the department met and decided that it would be a good experience for everyone to play and feel nervous that the entire string faculty was listening to them. And we got a lot out of that. I had 2 really beautiful senior recitals online, one which was given from a dorm room. It really almost made me weep, where in fact the music room for the music stand for the whole semester had been a prop on the Special K cereal box. She did manage to find a music stand for the event. So there were lots of lovely things that happened, and we had sometimes individually and sometimes with a small group had several discussions about how to look forward to the future and what to think about the future, and how to deal with the fact that one doesn't really know what's going to happen. And so the very best thing that any student can do, and that any of us can do, I guess, too, is to live in the moment and make the most of it. So I think Oberlin did a great job of living in the moment these last 8 weeks. So we'll turn it over to the students, I believe.
Yes, we have some of our students that are waiting to share some of their experiences with us. And I think we're each going to introduce our students. And I'd like to bring on one of my students, William Rewinkle. He's in his just completed his first year at Oberlin. What a year to complete. A lot of, talk about unanticipated pathways of learning, but some real, I'll just brag about you just for a moment, but I think you've had some remarkable moments this year, some great music making as you've become a part of the Oberlin family. And then suddenly in March, it was just, the rug was taken out from underneath you and you were sent home. And so William, I'd love to hear about your experience and what it's been like for you and what you're hoping for the future.
Well, thanks for having me. And yeah, I think overall the year has been very successful. I think even if we just focus on what the organ department was able to do in the first 6 or 7 months of the year that we were able to be on campus, we really got a lot done. And so I think just reliving the glory days is what was helping me get through, because I think this whole new avenue has gone okay. I mean, in terms of organ practicing, I would have to say it's been I've not been able to practice the organ at all since I left campus.
Yeah.
So I guess you could call that a total failure, but because we just rushed it, we were just forced into it all so quickly, and rightly so. First of all, I'll say I'm not trying to doubt anybody on that, but I mean, I've spent the last 8 weeks ordering a pedal board and then talking back and forth through emails with the guy who made it, because there were pedals sticking down and now the MIDI doesn't work. So you should explain that. So you were creating your own organ. Yeah, because we're just locked in at home, so I can't even drive to the church to practice the organ.
And
so
it's behind you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's behind me. You can see it right there. The 2 keyboards I put together, and then the pedal board is on the ground there. So the first problem was that some of the pedals would stick down when you play it, which is not what's supposed to happen if you've not seen an organ before. And so I opened it up with my dad, and we took a wrench and we bent the little metal bits between the pedals back into place so that they would all go down. And now the problem is about half of the pedal notes, when you press it, the note turns off, and when you lift up the pedal, the note turns on.
Oh no!
Which so unfortunately it's completely unusable, and I'm really trying to get it fixed up. I mean, I don't know for how much longer this is actually going to be an issue, and if at any point over the summer I could start practicing at church. But anyway, so I guess I've really been focusing on other things to do. I mean, I've started composing more, focusing on other classes I've took, and working on the little bits that you can play on the piano. I mean, I've got my class with Professor Moyer here where we work on piano exercises. Fortunately, we've got a piano at home, so that's not been a problem. And man, I did use the keyboards by themselves to have a Zoom lesson with another professor, and it was a challenge because Zoom. So first of all, there's delay. It converts to mono, low audio bit rate. So I mean, just listening to it and trying to decipher the notes that are being played. I mean, especially so using the Hauptwerk program, I was really just using a sample set that had a lot of echo and reverb, so it was just getting really muddy.
So anything with this real sustained tone
Yeah.
is totally cut out. So that was the same for everyone.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
Organ sound just does not transfer through, so it had to be done on recording.
I don't know if you've been able to do Zoom lessons with any other organ instruments, but I mean, I don't know if it would be very practical thing to do, because this Zoom program, I mean, I've got like a 2015 MacBook Pro and my fan is running as loud as it's ever been. I mean, this Zoom program would run my battery out so quickly. I mean, I don't know how I could bring this to my church and have it last for a whole lesson.
No, that's a real challenge going forward. I think it's mostly with recordings. I think I'm just being mindful of our time here too.
Oh yeah, sorry about that.
It's just great. I mean, not many students had to run home and then suddenly had to build an instrument so that they could on, and like, so I mean, your resourcefulness has been great, and I'll just also brag on you. I mean, you've really done some great compositions during this whole time. So I've seen that area of growth within you. I think you grew in that area that you weren't anticipating. That's part of the pathway of learning.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. I have to say that using recordings has been working very well. I mean, to record myself playing the piano to send it back to you, it's a higher quality.
Yeah.
You could hear the audio better. I just think it's a much better way to do, because, I mean, maybe we'll get some high quality audio over IP programs now. That this is a huge issue for a lot of people, but that's the thing. We had to get this all set up in 2 weeks time.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know at what point. Yeah, I mean, so it's.
Well, we'll keep working on it. I mean, and hopefully the technology will improve. I think we should pass it over to Professor Still and her student.
Yeah.
Love to hear about some of their experiences. Thank you, William.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And
I'm finally here. Yay. Okay. So thank you for sharing all that stuff, William and Jonathan. I'd like to introduce everybody to my student, Josephine Lee. Josephine is going to be a senior this coming year, and she happens to be a phenomenal flutist. She's done a lot of big solos in the ensembles programs, including memorizing huge, long, complicated things for contemporary music ensemble. And I think has found herself doing things that she probably didn't imagine she would be doing before coming to Oberlin. But I think that this has been actually quite hard for Josephine. And when the idea of doing this discussion came up, she immediately occurred to me as the person I should ask. One, because it would be good for her to interact with other people, but also because I'm sure that her feelings about this are not just hers. I'm sure other people are having some challenges with this too. And I thought it would be good for everybody out there to be able to talk about stuff with someone they might relate to. And I just wanted to say before I get Josephine to talk about it, Josephine helped me actually try a bunch of audio platforms. I made her sign into all sorts of weird and wonderful things. And most of them didn't work for anything. It was really a colossal waste of time, I'm sorry to say. I got quite excited about a gaming platform working, but then the video just didn't. It just overloaded terribly, right, Josephine? And I maybe later if there's time, get Josephine to play a bit so you can hear how the flute just like cuts out. It's ridiculous. So I feel with the teaching, thank God they were able to send me audio files, because most of the time I feel like when I'm teaching, I get to hear about 2/3 of it, and then the rest I'm just sort of using my imagination. I've come to realize that it doesn't matter if I ask them to start at different spots or anything. It's just about the volume, and the flute just cuts out. So we're just guessing here. And Josephine has actually done quite a few recordings with a pianist friend of hers and put them together using some software. So that was actually kind of cool. She's been bringing a pianist to her lessons, essentially. So Josephine, tell us what you think about all this.
I just think it was kind of hard for me to get used to having to discipline myself without my extracurricular, like on-campus activities, because I would work a lot outside of class, and I would also do like participate in things that my friends would put together, and even just like going to people's recitals. I think it just kind of provided a sense of security for me at school. So when I got home and I lost all of that, it was just really hard for me to even like go to class, which is not a problem that I've had really when I am at school.
I should add that Josephine is an AAAA plus student.
And even like I wasn't, in comparison to like freshmen and sophomores, I don't think I was taking a very heavy course load, but even then it was hard for me to participate, and that just made me feel really guilty about everything. And yeah, I think especially one of the classes I was taking this semester was an upper division music theory class. So it was very like seminar-like and discussion-based. And I think just having to do that not in person is just very kind of like debilitating. And I was really looking forward to learning about stuff in that class. And it just didn't work out the way I wanted it to. And I guess the good thing this taught me is that I kind of have to suck it up sometimes and not do everything I want and get all the results that I want. Yeah.
So Josephine's a perfectionist, and she's had to learn maybe that not everything has to be perfect, and the world will still continue. Yeah.
Yeah, I found it hard, especially because I didn't really have access to all like the school resources, like the counseling center, and like even I think one of the good things about Oberlin is like the self-recording equipment and stuff, and like having to record stuff for my lessons without like if I was at school, I would just have to press a button. But here I actually have to like place the camera well and make sure my flute isn't facing towards the phone, so it ends up sounding like a mess. And there are just other things I had to take care of. Yeah, I don't know. It was hard for me because I think I had a really hard time with adjusting to all of this, but everyone around me seemed like they were fine.
I actually think that that's your impression, and I think you're not the only one. I'm sure of that, actually. Anyway, I think I'm glad you are sharing. Good on you. And you look wonderful, by the way. So I'm going to pass on to Professor Jolly, and so she can get her voice student. I think the Zoom suits voice better than the other instruments, so I'm assuming that they haven't had the same sort of problems. You know, Zoom's actually built for voice, but I think the rest of us instrumentalists have had It's been a steep learning curve figuring out how to deal with the audio, that's for sure. Looks like Catherine's almost here. Yeah. Maybe I'll mention while we're waiting for Katherine to come on. I was so concerned about some of my students being a little bit under the weather in studio class that I actually dressed up for a couple just to give them something to think about and to laugh at, really. Anyway, Professor Jolly.
Thank you, Alexa. It was wonderful to hear your students' experience this semester. And I'd like to introduce first year voice major, May Alice Harrell, who joins us from Kentucky. So we'll just wait till May is up. A little backstory, I actually met May Alice during her senior year of high school, adjudicating a Schmidt Vocal Arts competition. And she was one of the winners. And that was prior to my knowing that I was going to be here at Oberlin, but she was so remarkable and just turned out to be serendipitous that we're both here now. So I'm waiting until I can see May.
I'm here, Dr. J.
There you are, dearest.
Hi.
So you've done such beautiful work this semester and grown so much. So maybe, yeah, just give us a little bit of your experience, you know, what's been hard, what's been challenging, what's been unexpectedly wonderful, or anything else you want to share?
I think I relate a lot to Josephine in that I very much thrive with all of my extracurriculars and being very busy. Having lots to do is when I'm happiest is when I'm busy. So losing all of that was really hard for me, and it still is, but I've also had a really amazing journey, I feel like, because it left me basically only with my voice, only with this, you know, art form to express myself and to explore more. And I feel like I've really started singing in a new way and singing for myself and not always constantly worrying about the next thing, the next performance, the next voice lesson. I feel like I've relaxed a lot.
Yeah.
It's something that Dr. J and I both know probably needed to happen. But this has been not amazing. Like, I would never have wanted this, but I think I've grown so much in these past few weeks. And I think I will be able to take a lot of that back to school if we are able to do that next year or next semester. And if not, like, eventually when we're all in person again, when I'm singing for an audience again, I think I'll be able to bring all of this new view of what I'm doing to my performance. So it's not been great, but it's been rewarding, I think.
Well, that's wonderful. I mean, that's probably the most we could ask for under the circumstances, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Do you want to sing at all for people so they can hear just a little bit of how the audio translates through the voice? I will say, I think what Professor Still said is probably correct, that in some ways it's easier for us than some instruments. But there are also some challenges too. I have found, you know, teaching each of you with all of your different instruments and where weight and ring is different in different acoustic spaces, that it's much like, for me, it's been like traveling as a professional singer, and every hall is different. Every space you're performing in is different. And so it's almost like cat ears, where you are constantly adjusting what you're hearing, but not adjusting physically what you're doing. And so, yeah, I think it'd be great for them to hear a little something. If you want to sing, dearest. If not, we can just chat.
We can sing.
So most of my students have pre-recorded tracks that our wonderful collaborative pianists recorded for them. Many of them I also recorded for them. So that's been a great help. But we've also done quite a bit of a cappella singing, and everyone's pitch has improved. So that's great. This is a beautiful piece. Do you want to tell them what you're going to sing, May?
Sure, yes. This is Jupiter Has Seven Moons from the song cycle I Hate Music by Leonard Bernstein. Jupiter has seven moons, or is it nine? Saturn has a million, billion, trillion, 69. And everyone has a little sun with 6 little moons of its own. But we have only one. Just think of all the fun we'd have if there were 9. Then we could be just 9 times more romantic. Dogs would bay till they were frantic. We'd have 9 tides in the Atlantic. The man in the moon would be gigantic. But we have only one. Only one.
That was beautiful, May. Thank you for
Thank
doing
you.
that. So May has a very high coloratura instrument, and this piece sits a majority in her middle voice. And so some of the challenges that my colleagues were discussing about extreme pitch or volume happens in the voice more so on the upper end of the spectrum. So this piece is kind of a great one to show the successfulness of Zoom. But we know sometimes when we're doing exercises, the higher you get, sometimes I have to ask you to repeat something because I lost it. But you have a Blue Yeti mic, do you not, May,
Yes,
that you've
I
been
do.
using for lessons? And the majority of my studio has some type of microphone, and that's made a great, that's been a great help, I think, all around, as well as for me teaching with this gives me a little better hearing than it was just in my space. Do you want to say anything else before we pass it to Professor McDonald? I know you all are going to come back and chat together a little bit.
I think just for sake of time, we can go ahead and pass it to Professor McDonald. But thank you
Okay.
so much, Dr. Jolly.
All right.
Hello.
Hey, Asher.
Hi.
This is my student, Asher Wolfman, and he is the elder statesman of the McDonald Studio because he's been here for 5 years and he has now graduated with a double degree in literature. He's a terrific violinist, and I'll tell one secret about him, which is that I had an assignment at the end of the semester that everyone was to give me a recording of what they considered to be their best work of the semester. And there is only one student who did not hand in the assignment.
Is that
How are
the
you
only
doing?
reason you asked me to come to this?
Okay, it's good to see you. What do you have to say about what it was like? It was kind of a downer for you to end your career in Oberlin that way.
Yeah, it was pretty tragic, actually. And I think just getting over the initial shock of it was really difficult. I think it took me a few weeks to really come to terms with that this was the new reality and that I should just take advantage of what I had. And then I started to actually feel really grateful for so many of the advantages that I have been given during all of this. And so for one, I have a space that I can practice both in Oberlin and now in New Jersey with my house with my family. I'm able to practice here, and I'm just grateful that I don't have many extenuating circumstances that are making it hard to accomplish my work. So I've been actually feeling really productive, and I'll get you that recording as soon as I can. But yeah, I actually I think what was a big difference for me, I noticed, is that normally my practicing kind of accelerates as I get to my weekly lesson, and then maybe like the days after you kind of feel like, oh, well, I have some time to work on everything. But I actually felt like during all this, it was like I was so starved for inspiration that by the time I was like getting to my lesson, I felt like I needed it so badly. I needed to hear words of encouragement, and I needed to have advice. I needed to like hear your criticism. I just needed to like have feedback, and then it was like a jolt of re inspiration and energy after that, and then that got me through most of the week until I could see you again. So it kind of like really made me so grateful to have that.
Well, you did great work, actually. You made a lot of progress, even though I could commiserate with your situation in that you were really finished with Oberlin, you know? And so you made a great effort. But how do you feel about the whole Zoom situation? What was your feeling about it in general?
It was difficult. Well, I think I got the perspective that maybe some of the faculty had, in that we had studio class where it was live, so we could see everybody performing on Zoom, so we got to see what it sounded like when we were playing, or get an idea of it. So that part was hard. It seemed like it varied a lot from person to person, what kind of connection they were getting and what the quality of sound was. But in general, I think we all had to adjust to a different kind of listening where you just, well, I think Professor McDonald always told us to like, we were there to make each other nervous more than to really make any judgment on the performance. It wasn't the same as when you go to studio and you're listening critically, or listening for all the good things. Even it was just a different experience. But I felt like in our lessons we accomplished a lot, and you were able to make some really astute observations about my playing that I felt like maybe weren't even so evident in person, because there are other things that take priority. But I still felt like I got so much out of it.
Did you bring your violin now?
Yes.
Can you play us a scale from bottom to top?
Sure.
Or something? The beginning of the Beethoven Concerto?
That's what I was going to play, yeah.
Good.
Because I know you haven't heard enough of it.
Oh, we had the Zoom god on our side.
Oh, really?
that was excellent. I think perhaps we are either going back to all the students together or faculty together. So we'll wait for the next step. Thank you,
Okay,
Asher.
good. Nice to see you.
Okay. Well, thanks, and May and Asher, thanks again. That was very nice. Thanks for sharing.
Pleasure.
So okay, there's Josephine. So okay, if you would forgive me leading with the question, I think it would be good to talk about what kind of classes we took. Is Asher, you're a double degree student. I took some college classes as well. What's that like? Did any of your classes change? What kinds do you think worked the best? Because I had a lot of lecture style classes, and I didn't think those went too bad. I think that was the all right way to do it.
Yeah, I think the lecture classes definitely worked the best. I agree, because that just felt like, like not too much of a mental shift. The classes that were the strangest, I think, were discussion-based classes, just because I think that's already awkward as it is in person for people to feel like to be brave enough to speak. So once you go on Zoom and there's this added layer of anonymity that you can kind of like hide behind your mute button, I found that in a lot of my classes people weren't participating as much, just because there wasn't that like feeling of like you're sitting around in the room and no one's talking, so I better say something. I think that's like what gets a lot of people to talk in class sometimes. So I think that was difficult. How do you guys feel?
I feel like personally, for me, the thing that worked best was when teachers and professors really strove to keep things as typical as possible. But as Dr. Jolly said, we still had a studio recital and we still had juries and things like that really helped me stay engaged with the course, as well as my oral skills course strangely worked really well online. My teacher put a lot of work into it and it totally paid off for me. I felt like I am completely prepared to go into oral skills 3 next semester, and I think that's really a testament to things staying on the track that they should have been on had we been on campus.
What do you think, Josephine?
Well, I agree with Asher about the discussion-based lecture thing. I think especially when you get into upper division classes, that kind of format is a lot more common. And especially because the material can be really dense, I feel like it was hard for me to really understand it when there wasn't a feeling of having to speak or like having it be mandatory to discuss. So I think in that way, my understanding of like course material was not as detailed as it could have been if we were on campus.
Okay. Well, before we go, we have another question. Yeah, what mic do you use, Asher? You can say while we're transitioning.
I just use my laptop. I don't have a mic. I'm in the market if anybody has recommendations.
Well,
I have a mic that Dr. Jolly has us have. It's the Blue Yeti. It's worked well for us. I don't know anything about things like this.
Yeah.
I have.
Great. Well, I think I'm slowly coming back into the loop. I think we're all coming back online here to kind of wrap up our discussion today. This has been really wonderful to hear your experiences. Also to kind of empathize a little bit with your challenges. It's been real for everyone. Yes, Professor Smith.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think I'm not sure that any of us actually invited anybody to ask questions via the Q&A. Yeah, so if anyone's watching and would like to ask anybody or have us address a topic, please use the Q&A box, and we're watching that, and hopefully we'll respond.
Definitely. I thought maybe until we get a question, we could kind of wrap up our time with a discussion about our hopes going forward. We obviously don't know exactly what the fall is going to hold. Universities, conservatories are beginning to announce their plans, but they're different for every institution, I've heard, and it could all change in August. But maybe there are some principles, some guiding principles that have emerged from this time, and maybe some good suggestions that some of our students have for us. So, any thoughts as we go forward?
I'll leap in. I've always wanted to get my students to record something for me on a weekly basis because I think it's just pedagogically a really good idea. But it always seems so profoundly mean for me to ask for that, that I'd never done it. But I think no matter what, I'm going to try and hang on to that because I really think the idea of recording and having to listen to themselves immediately is actually beneficial.
Yes, I think definitely recording is going to be much more part of our lives. Yeah. I'll just say personally, I'm actually, I never thought I would say this, but I might be exploring some online courses, especially on some of the academic pursuits in relation to Oregon, because I think, frankly, it's going to open up Oberlin to a much broader community of people that want to take advantage of our resources going forward. William.
Yeah, Professor Still, I have to say, I agree with you about recording being a useful tool because I do it myself. And what I've found is that it puts you in the same mindset as when you're performing live for other people, which is, you know, the adrenaline rush, what we live for. but then it puts you in a different mindset, right, than when you're just practicing. So I found that it helps me, practice playing live, trying to make it better, like, work through, any missed notes that you make. For me as an organist, that happens all the time. But it's a really good tool.
I don't think it's unique to you, William. I think everyone has to work on notes.
Yeah.
I think I agree with all of you. I think I'm going to keep video recording happening weekly, because I know that's something that was challenging for you in the beginning, May, and then kind of letting go of that like self-consciousness,
Yes.
which I think is a huge part of the journey as a singer, that we're able to listen and not listen, be in the body, but also be able to see what you look like so you can make those adjustments going forward. So
We have a question that's come in from Jean Hensler. She's asking, what is the grading system now 49 years after I graduated? Wow. Congratulations, Jean. And did you have to go to pass-fail this semester? Well, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, all of our applied lessons have been letter grade. And I think there was some provision made in the academic world that students could select pass-fail. But
I can take that.
what would you like to say, William?
Yeah, so we did change pass no pass to pass no entry.
That's right.
Which is where if you fail, it wouldn't even show up for other people to see. And the only catch is that the threshold was changed from like below D- to a D+ or below is a no entry. So there was a little bit of a higher threshold for what would be considered a fail if you decide to go that route. But
that was only for academic classes.
yeah, and it was optional. I mean, you had the option to keep the regular grading system.
So someone's also asked a question about how to demonstrate technique over Zoom. And I'd like to take the opportunity to say that Oberlin actually provided us with some microphones if you wanted them. And I've got an Audio Technica, which has this very cool blue light in it. But I think it does actually improve things. So I can play. I felt a bit frustrated because my students don't all have microphones. Obviously, it's a one-way street, right? And at least with Zoom, you can sort of see what they can see, right? So you just hold your flute up and do that. And a lot of verbal discussion. But maybe that's actually a good thing. Sometimes it's easy to fall into the way you always show things or describe things, and when you have to be a bit more verbal, a bit more clear over Zoom, maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I think it's been pretty much the same for me as in person, using a lot of, visual cues on myself, stepping back from the camera to talk about body, different things that are happening in the body, and asking my students to do the same. So it hasn't felt that different to me. I don't know what you would think, May.
I agree.
I think certainly at the organ, it's been really challenging.
Yeah.
Because we can't have, well, first of all the instruments are different, and some of them had no instruments. And then certainly when I'm observing our organists play, I'm standing back, I'm observing all the elements of the instrument themselves, their interaction with the pedal board, the manuals, the stops, all of this. And, and that was a huge loss for our organ students. And we'll find ways to move forward, but they've grown in other ways. They've grown intellectually. I think we've had a lot of just development of those other senses, the senses of hearing, the senses of listening and observing other performances, and what you can learn just by listening to recordings of each other. I mean, that's been good for me, to listen to just an audio recording sometime and make and have discussions about what that implies technically and musically. So
I think that our ears have improved because of Zoom.
Yes.
we've had to overcome difficulties. And I also think that that is the benefit of recording, of having students record. I always ask people to record 20 minutes every week, and it generally doesn't happen. Maybe it will now more because it's more difficult to be so specific on Zoom, especially for us. But I do think our ears have improved. And so maybe our sensitivity to make judgments about what needs to improve, what is the real underlying problem, is hopefully going to be easier for us.
We had a question about pre-recorded accompaniments and any recommendations. I know through the voice department, people have used different apps, as well as had our wonderful pianists or some of us ourselves record for our students. So this summer, I think almost everyone in the studio is continuing with lessons, and so I think we're going to try out App Accompanist, which has gotten rave reviews from a lot of my colleagues around the nation. Just this semester, I thought it would be too much to add that in to all the other challenges that our students were encountering, and so it was easier to send tracks. But on App Accompanist, you can adjust speed, tempo, rubato, all those kinds of things. So hopefully we have another week and a half before we resume lessons. Everyone can start playing around with that to figure it out before we resume.
Great. Well, I think this has been, I think we could go for a long time. I'll introduce everyone to my son, Samuel. Okay. He's been studying music and studying cello too, with an OB grad, so that's good. Is there any other thoughts before we wrap up our time? Any words of inspiration as we go forward? I mean, you've all been inspiring already. But I just keep encouraging my students to meditate every day, and I'm doing the same so that we can, what I always say is start the day as a singer, end the day as a singer. And part of that is just reconnecting to your human self first, and starting and ending the day with gratitude, which I think right now we all need. Mm-hmm. So those are my parting words, and I look forward to seeing you all in person, but it's so nice to see you Brady Bunch style. Gratitude. I think that's the perfect word, that making sense of pandemics, academics in pandemics. Maybe we weren't expecting to be grateful, but I think there's a lot that we've learned from it.
Right. I heard a wonderful quote by someone who said, everyone wants to be happy, and they say they will be grateful if they're happy. But he said, oh no, you should be grateful first, and then you will be happy. So that's something for us to work on, all of us,
yes,
students and faculty alike. We hope everybody has a good summer, and we'll see you in Zoom in the summer, but hopefully in real life in the fall.
Hello.
Thank you to the students.
Yes, thank you, May, Asher, William, Josephine.
Well, thanks very much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can't wait to giving everyone a hug at some point.
Yes, 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 sir.
Someday. So, thank you all.